Hey Brian, how are you?
Hey, Nicholas, doing well. How's everything on your end?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Good.
I'm going to do some intro first.
Mhm.
Hi, welcome everyone. Today is the 10th of April. I'm Nick from EquitiesTracker, and I'll be speaking with Brian, head of content from Santiment, about the latest crypto news and updates. Hey
Great,
Brian.
great to be here, Nick. I'm excited to talk about everything. It's been a wild couple of weeks or months since we last spoke, and I'm looking
Yep,
forward to catching up.
yep. There's a lot of things that happened after the war started. But it feels really funny because cryptocurrency markets seem to just move sideways. So let's find out what's happening.
Yeah, it's definitely been a mixed bag. I can share my screen a little bit and we can talk about some things together. But from what I'm seeing, it's been kind of uh, still a bit of a downer month, even with the rebound for most altcoins out there.
Mm-hmm.
While Bitcoin, Ethereum, as we can see here, this is the past 30 days of price performance. Bitcoin and Ethereum are up a little bit. You've got a few assets like Tron, Hyperliquid still doing well. Um, Leo, Bitfinex's native coin, is doing well. And then we have to really go all the way over to BitTensor, which is the big star among the top 50 market caps. But look at all the red. I mean, it's still about, call it 80%, 75% of the top 50 to 60 market caps in red right now over the past 30 days.
That's interesting. I mean, it's quite. Everybody was asking whether is the bottom in. Seems like
Mm-hmm.
looks like it's still not in yet. I guess based on all this.
Well, it's a matter of perspective because we did get all the way below 64K back, what was it, uh, early February. Let me double check and make sure I have the prices right. Yeah, so February 4th, it got all the way down to 62.7. So if we're looking at the past 2 months, I guess technically a bottom has come in because we're still
Mm.
significantly above that. But if we look at, the past, um, however, couple of weeks, we're pretty much just treading water at the moment.
Oh, okay. So how's Bitcoin doing currently?
Yeah, I mean, from an on-chain perspective, there's some mixed signals here. I'm a little, hesitant to get too into predictions because that's not what we do. But what I can say is
Yeah.
so much of the markets and the status of where we are likely headed is going to depend on whether, there's finally some war transparency. We thought we had it at the beginning of the week with this ceasefire that was announced. And then all of a sudden, um, we hear that Israel isn't fully in agreement. Lebanon is still trying to be in the mix, but other countries disagree. And there's airstrikes that are still going on. And I'm refreshing X all the time to try to get an idea of what's to come for crypto. And I just hear that another airstrike happened here. Um, you know, the terms that Trump laid out weren't actually the truth, or they weren't fully explained to one country or another. So here we are. It's almost like we're right back where we started. We did get that big jump back on Tuesday when we did hear about the news. It was like Tuesday afternoon, my time.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, it just sort of stayed flat ever since. So the ceasefire, I think there's still a lot of opinions about whether it truly is a ceasefire. The latest reporting I'm seeing is one, airstrikings are still happening. And two, there's going to be a major meeting between countries on Saturday, where presumably a lot of the negotiations that people are hoping lead to a permanent ceasefire or, knock on wood, a true end to the war, that would indicate that markets can really start to thrive. And a lot of the on chain and social metrics that we heavily believe in are going to matter even more. I wouldn't say they don't matter right now. It's just everything has to be taken with a grain of salt because of the macroeconomic situation that we're all in right now.
Yeah. Um, the with the war and the ceasefire being so uncertain, currently, what's the reception like in in the United States? Like, are the people aligned, or what's the
Yeah,
reception?
I mean, in the US, people are so politically far apart when you talk about the Republicans that are on the far right, the Democrats that are on the far left. I think there is a mutual agreement between both parties that life is getting pretty expensive. You know, the cost of living for this, buying a house, gas prices were noticeably higher, especially during March when oil's prices were surging. Groceries are more expensive. But I think the difference is there's different priorities between the Republican and Democrat side. And in general, people are not the most happy. I'd say the majority of people are not very happy that the war is happening. And many people feel a bit lied to, like every time they get their hopes up, the opposite ends up happening.
Yep. I guess we are seeing that in every part of the world, even including in Malaysia. It's inflation is rising.
Mm-hmm.
All our daily groceries and daily spending, everything is also rising. So I think everyone can feel the pressure aspect of the war.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it would completely stop if the war went away. There are multiple reasons that prices have rocketed as high as they are for the average person, and the war is the convenient excuse for that happening at the moment, at least for the U.S., because we're actually involved in the war. Malaysia is not directly involved in the war, of course.
Yes,
but
correct.
Secondarily, if you have such large countries or powerful countries, especially the U.S. and Israel, are per capita very, very large, powerful countries. The whole world gets impacted when they are at odds with other countries.
Yep. Recently there's news saying that the Strait of Hormuz, they want to charge a Bitcoin on the toll.
Yeah.
So
I think that's been confirmed, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just looking at some Trump news. If we look at Hormuz, a lot of it is dominated. Let's see. That's a funny meme. If I just put in Bitcoin here. Yeah, multiple reports say Iran's charging around $1 per barrel for oil tankers to transit the Strait of Hormuz. It's really all over the place. And it really depends on the reporter, but I think I've seen enough credible reporters that have actually stated that it's factual. Cointelegraph. Wow. So yeah, it's a thing. It was rumored a few days ago, right after the ceasefire happened, and apparently it really is happening.
Wow. So I mean, although things are grim, this can be a win for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about that. Obviously, this increases what the amount of utility otherwise would be. I don't know how. I mean, sure, it is definitely proving that world leaders believe in crypto as a form of payment, but it's such a small niche purpose for it. I mean, what percentage of the actual world is traveling through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis? It's probably fairly small. But it at least is proving that Bitcoin has its viability for something that is on a world stage right now.
Yeah. So how does Bitcoin look on chain after all these events?
Yeah. So on this screen that I was showing, really, as we've discussed on some previous shows, we try to look for some improvement on this bright green line, which represents the percentage of supply held by wallets with 10 to 10,000 Bitcoin in them. Right now, they've been very flat, extremely flat, even because, frankly, I don't think even whales and multi-millionaires and billionaires are sure what the state of the world is going to look like in a month, 2, 3 months from now. So it's very tough for them to confidently accumulate or confidently dump, because things can change by the day, as we've seen. So it's not really good or bad news. It just looks like they're very inactive at the moment. One of the most inactive periods we've seen since COVID started. In the meantime, the small retail holders that have less than 0.01 BTC, they've collectively been accumulating most dips and continue to add on any opportunity they can find. Now, they don't hold very much. They just have about 0.25% of the supply, but this does reflect their overall sentiments and their overall perspectives of Bitcoin and crypto at this time.
Wow. Seems like retail is still believing that it's going to be the next thing.
Yeah, I think in general, retail is just expecting an eventual relief rally. And whenever Trump talks and says, oh, the war is almost over, that's definitely the majority narrative that he has been, perpetuating since the war started about 6 weeks ago. Whenever he breathes in some optimism, people listen and they'll scoop up, expecting that they may wake up the next day and the war will be over. So they don't want to miss out if, the high 60Ks or low 70Ks are the lowest Bitcoin's going to be indefinitely.
Yeah, understand.
So ideally, we want to see the bright green line rise and the red line fall. And right now, the bright green line is moving completely sideways while the red line rises. So that's not quite ideal yet.
Yep. So there's still some time before we see any kind of price reversal in that sense.
Yeah, anything can happen. It's not something we could predict because there could easily be a group of whales that just decide to jack up the price tomorrow. But based on the probabilities and the data we have in front of us, there's nothing that indicates that the dam is about to break and suddenly we're going to have this flood of new money and increased demand for Bitcoin, which would justify a higher price. But at the same time, we don't see anything indicating it's going to crash. So, just ballparking it, but I would estimate that 80% of Bitcoin's next month is going to depend on whether this war shows signs of concluding soon or does conclude soon, definitively. And either of those two things would allow people, especially key stakeholders, to start accumulating with confidence again.
Yep.
So what we're looking at now is just Bitcoin's price versus the S&P 500 versus gold. I checked year to date, right, just about a week before it's cut off here. Bitcoin is actually down about 20% on the year. The S&P is down about 2% on the year, and gold is up about 9% on the year. So there is an argument that once markets start to transition back into a bull cycle, there can be a big catch-up period for Bitcoin, and we may see some pretty nice rises. I do think that this is one of the more bullish arguments right now, because regression to the mean would indicate that Bitcoin has the higher upside compared to the other two sectors.
Gold seems to be coming back up as well. So,
yeah. Since the crash, it looks like it's up about 14% or so. And the S&P is up about 5%. But yeah, everything has gotten a little bit better since late March. This was actually when Bitcoin was holding up pretty well compared to the other two. But eventually it fell down.
Yep.
Yeah, I still think that, if the war goes on, gold and silver probably would be the safest bets of the three. If the war starts to look like it's concluding, watch for the S&P 500 and Bitcoin to really start to thrive.
Yeah, I think that really that all of this really depend on the war.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes. When looking at the sentiment, it's actually looking pretty positive right now, which is to be expected because as you can see, whenever we go up high, this gray line is Bitcoin's price. And then the gold line is the ratio of all the positive comments divided by all the negative comments. So anything really high, like above this line, that's when people are starting to get really bullish. Anything below right around that line, that's when people are getting extremely bearish. So when people get extremely bearish, prices generally go up. When they get extremely bullish, that's when we start to correct. And we've already started to correct just in the first couple hours after this close. I can make it more granular, let's say 8-hour periods instead of 1. So you can see how it got up high right here, and then the new 8-hour period started and it topped and started to go back down.
Yep.
So greed, it may not always be spot on with where prices top, but it's generally pretty close to it. You see the greedy points be spots where we start to see price decline, and the fearful spots are when we start to see Bitcoin have its best buy opportunities.
So it's really about catching when the sentiment is really bad.
Exactly. Like look at the beginning of March. Look how low it was. There were about 4 bearish comments per every 3 bullish comments on social media. And then all of a sudden we see Bitcoin skyrocket because historically the crowd will get it wrong. And if the crowd is leaning together and believe Bitcoin is bullish, now is the most, ideal time you could ever buy. That's usually what they're saying right about here, right before a bunch of suckers buy in and then watch their profits collapse into a deficit.
Yeah.
If we look at some of the trending stories too, these are just what our algorithm is picking up as 5 of the biggest narratives and stories that are touching on anything crypto related right now or crypto adjacent. And you can see the ceasefire tensions are clearly number 1 right now. Here it says, reporters say Trump urged Netanyahu to curb strikes in Lebanon to protect Iran ceasefire talks. Netanyahu still vows force against Hezbollah while agreeing to direct Lebanon talks. Iran accuses the U.S. and Israel of violating the deal and restricts Strait of Hormuz traffic, rattling oil and crypto markets. So in general, the latest narrative that people are discussing is whether the ceasefire actually is real. Because if we go back just a couple days ago, this was the day. So if we go to the day of the ceasefire, may clinch this was when they're just discussing, they're about to clinch a short ceasefire. Pakistan has cast his meteor with a 2-week pause tied to Iran immediately. So this was when everyone was very optimistic. And we look at the price chart. Let's just go to the 6th, zoom in a little bit. So all of this news was happening right about here. And then all of a sudden we take off when the news is officially made on the 7th. So this blasts off with all of the news about 2-week pause. They're just going to sign on the dotted lines. The war will be over soon. They're going to, discuss the details of the proposal, and then crypto is going to thrive. Well, then we get this 2-day period of wait, is it a ceasefire? Why are these airstrikes still happening? Wait, I thought Israel wasn't going to be doing any more strikes. What's this thing about Lebanon? And now there's all this uncertainty. We get this top. Yes, we're still relatively high at 72.2K, but the sentiment is starting to come back down again. And if we go back to the trending stories back to today, it makes sense because the top story is now about violations of the ceasefire. Netanyahu still vows to force against Hezbollah. So you can see how much people swing back and forth based on whatever the latest in the news cycle is that's being fed to them.
Yep.
And then below, go ahead.
No, just saying that the sentiment now is getting the market is really driven by sentiment right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. As crypto always is, for especially in times of crisis, when the crowd starts to lock onto COVID or the Ukraine-Russia war or the FTX collapse or interest rates rising or falling. All of these things are topics that are suddenly going to be obsessed over in a sentiment-driven sector like cryptocurrency. And when they get very bearish, you might see like a short-term bottom. And then if they get universally bearish about it, like for example, March of 2020 or April 2020 about COVID, everyone says, well, crypto is going to zero now. That's when crypto just skyrocketed. And you saw Bitcoin, bottom out just below 4,000 and quickly went above 20,000, like 4 to 6 months later. So you see just how much people lean one way, especially when they're leaning all that the same way collectively. FTX would be another example where everyone thought Sam Bankman-Fried ruined crypto forever. Bitcoin goes below 16K, and then within 2 years, it's up above 100K, or 2.5 years, whatever the exact amount of time was. But it was a relatively short amount of time when suddenly people were almost 8xing their profits from buying during the time when everyone else was selling.
Yep.
You got the Clarity Act too, right below it right now. And that's, I think, not quite equally as important, but very high right now. We've been hearing about it, I'd say, in the mainstream circles for about 3 months now. And it says, highlighting urgency, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent pressed the Senate Banking Committee to hold a markup and send the Clarity Act to President Trump. He framed clear crypto market structure rules as an economic and national security priority. Supporters say delays push firms offshore and cede leadership. Opponents are not clearly quoted. So Clarity Act, I think, universally is being seen as a bullish act if passed, and would allow a lot more trustability. Transparency is one thing, but trust is so much of what crypto needs right now and what has been holding it back. And with the Clarity Act, we suddenly see, at the very least, a little more understanding of what the regulations are, and it gives people more guidance in which assets they can trust and invest in, which ones they could potentially stay away from. Because as the name is stated, this act gives more clarity and gives more of a path to investing with confidence.
Yes. Yeah.
So when there's a setback, you can see a lot of people very, concerned, and then prices may go down a little bit. When it looks like it might be going through soon, like the Treasury Secretary highlighting urgency, that's when you see the sentiment skewing very bullish all of a sudden. So great sign there.
Is that one of the reasons that the price recently just pumped?
I think it's possible. We can look up Clarity and Act. So we're just looking at all the mentions together, and you can see currently the social dominance for the Clarity Act is up to almost 0.5% of all discussions, which is a massive amount for something that is normally kind of a niche subject. And right now, it does appear that this pump has a lot to do with people's optimism that this is finally going to be pushed through pretty soon. We can even scroll down. We see Telegram is pretty dormant. Reddit had a major conversation about it a couple days ago. Actually, yesterday on the 8th. I think it's the 10th for you, right? But it's the 9th for me still.
Yep.
And then X, X has been discussing it a little more frequently in the past 24 hours. Not too much on 4chan, Bitcoin Talker, Farcaster. So it looks to be primarily Reddit and X that have been perpetuating a lot of discussions about the Clarity Act.
Wow.
Yeah, and just looking at, one or two other metrics, I'm continuing to monitor the NVRV. Returns for wallets that have been active in the past 30 days is just above zero at plus 3%, but the 365-day MVRV is at about minus 24%. So if you're investing long-term, this signal still indicates that you'd be buying in at a low-risk moment in Bitcoin's history or adding onto your position. We'd like to see the short-term MVRV fall back below zero, though. It doesn't mean prices have to fall, but even if they just go flat for a while or people start to buy the top a little too much or sell at the bottom, that's what will help push this MVRV back below zero. And that would be a good signal because you want to typically buy when both the 30-day and 365-day MVRVs are well below zero. And you can see all the moments here where these were good buy opportunities.
Yep. So in order to be less risky to get into Bitcoin, it's better that you get a low MVRV for 365 and 30.
Oh yeah, definitely try, no matter what the asset is. We've only looked at Bitcoin, but try to avoid being in an asset when the MVRVs are both above zero, like right here, and try to get in when they're both below zero, like right here, or even right here. Most crashes are when everyone gets in severe pain. And if we look at the history of Bitcoin, every single crash that's ever happened has had a recovery to them, especially the short-term ones. I know some people say, well, the all-time high was 6 months ago now, and we haven't recovered from that. Well, if you want to call it a crash, so be it. But, you know, especially these short-term crashes right here, they always tend to have some sort of relief eventually, even this latest one from February. So yeah, overall, I think we're in an okay spot. It's sort of a weird time still because of the fact that crypto is still so tied to these macroeconomic events like the war and the Clarity Act. Even interest rates are still something that are very relevant to prices right now. But overall, Nick, you know, I think as long as you're patient, you can come out of this whole thing okay.
Yeah, I believe so too. There's one thing that I think highlight was that's piqued my interest is actually that Michael Saylor is continuing to buy Bitcoin, and he has this subsidiary STRC where he hold the price at $100 to give out a yield generating asset to anybody buying it at 11.50% yield. I think that is a really high risk thing to do, isn't it? Like,
it really shows his confidence that Bitcoin will continue to rise in price over the long term.
I
he really thinks that these nice risky yield rewards that he offers are going to pay for themselves because of all of the Bitcoin that he and his company hoard.
Guess it just feels like that's I understand the confidence, but it's super risky.
Yeah. Now he's definitely someone who has a reputation for risk and doesn't hold back if he believes in something. So some refer to the whole STRC thing as a flex, like him just being able to show the world, look what I've been able to do. This is how much, it's almost like it's his way of bragging about how much he believes in Bitcoin and how much he owns, right? Because he's willing to take this secondary risk with his own company. And the investors are like, well, 11.5%, that sounds pretty good to me. So I guess the only person who really loses if Bitcoin somehow doesn't go up is Saylor and Strategy, but the yield farmers are still getting paid in the meantime.
Well, that's true. And there's this news about the quantum computing gonna break Bitcoins in 9 minutes or things like that. So how did that affect the confidence of the market in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's mostly just a theory. I don't see where that's proven, but it's possible. I've seen all sorts of stuff about cloud computing being at risk and how AI is going to crack all of these different things. A little bit of it is fear mongering.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest argument that Bitcoin could be at risk is if another coin comes along that does everything it does, but better. But that's why we have tens of thousands of altcoins already. They're all trying to do what Bitcoin does, but better. And many argue that there are thousands of coins out there that do it better already, but it hasn't stopped Bitcoin from being the number one asset year after year.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I guess the question I have is, how exactly would quantum computing break Bitcoin? Maybe it cracks some sort of code. I guess the fear would be the last million or so of supply that's left could be mined in an instant. That would be kind of scary. Yeah. But even then, like, what would be the overall consequence of that? It would just mean that Bitcoin is now even more scarce because there's not even any coins left to be mined. It's a really interesting theory to consider, but I don't know how quantum computing would break Bitcoin or make it go to zero somehow in value. I think there'd always be a demand for it. I guess if the network ceased to exist or stopped working, that could be a big problem. But there's experts out there who know way more than I do and have studied this subject way more.
Yep, understand. So to wrap up, it seems that we are in a uncertain period where even the whales don't know what to do. They seem to just be hovering.
Yeah, I mean, whale transactions are at like a 4-year low right now. You could see by that green line that I showed you, they're just moving sideways right now. So it's not necessarily a bad thing when whales are sitting on their coins. We would like to see more utility overall. But until we have an idea of where the world is going to really go, it's just hard to understand fully, what the upside is of making a huge buy or a huge sell if you're putting yourself in the whale's shoes right now.
Yep, I understand. So it's just, I guess everybody's waiting at the moment. There is a lot of upside news, but at the same time, there's not a lot of downside news as well.
Exactly. It's just a totally wait and see situation right now. And, many people are still down quite a bit from buying near the all-time high 6 months ago. So, I think it's just full of, the network is smaller than it was 6 months ago, obviously, like it is in every bear cycle. But I think a lot of people are just afraid of making mistakes and have paralysis by analysis, as we say.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I guess that's everything for today. Thanks so much, Brian, for coming on. I think everyone should know that now is very uncertain period, but make some adjustment to your own portfolio according to the sentiment. So I guess, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Nick. It's always a great time talking markets with you. And
yes,
I'm looking forward to catching up next month to see if we've finally turned a corner on what's been such a strange time in crypto's lifespan.
Yeah, same here. I think I'm still pretty excited to see what's going to happen. So.
Same. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yes. All right, then. Thank you so much, Brian.
Take care.
Take care.